The night Lucas Grant's life flipped upside down, the rain was coming down so hard it looked like the whole city was melting. He'd just left a glittering fundraiser at the Rosewood Grand, the kind of place where champagne costs more than most people's rent, and everyone pretends to like each other for the sake of a photo. At 6'3" with movie star looks and a custom tux that fit like it was sewn onto him, Lucas had always been the kind of man people noticed, and he was used to it. That night, his fiancée, Sabrina Lowell, hung on his arm like she was born for it. Her dress shimmered under the chandeliers, her smile practiced for the cameras. On paper, they were perfect. In reality, Lucas was starting to wonder if she loved him or just loved the way people looked at them together. The rain was coming in sideways when they stepped outside. His driver was already there, but Lucas waved him off. "I'll drive. Need to clear my head." Sabrina raised a brow, glanced at the wet streets, but said nothing. Halfway across the Westbridge overpass, his phone lit up with a call from his business partner, Ryan. Lucas hit the hands free. "Yeah," he said. "They want an extra 4% on the deal," Ryan's voice crackled. "That's ridiculous. Tell them that's when it happened." Headlights came out of nowhere, a delivery truck drifting into their lane. Lucas yanked the wheel tires, screaming on wet asphalt. The world spun, metal tearing glass, exploding. Sabrina's scream, cutting through everything, then nothing. When Lucas woke up, all he saw was white. The ceiling, the lights, the sheets, the sterile smell of antiseptic. His body ached everywhere but his face. His face burned. He tried to speak the words, scratching out of him, "Sabrina." A nurse leaned over. "You've been in an accident, Mr. Grant. You're stable now, but you've undergone major reconstructive surgery." Hours later, Sabrina came. He turned toward her, desperate for some anchor in the chaos. But she froze in the doorway. Her eyes flicked to his face and stayed there. He saw it, that subtle shift, like she'd already made up her mind. "You're alive," she said, her voice flat. "Come here," he whispered. She didn't move. "Lucas, I can't do this." She gestured vaguely at him, at the bed, at everything. "You're different. I'm sorry, but I can't marry you now." And just like that, she left. The silence that followed was heavier than any painkiller haze. Friends stopped calling, or they called just enough to ease their guilt. Old flames suddenly had busy schedules. Even at board meetings, people who once fought to shake his hand now spoke to him through others. The scars on his face became scars on his life, so Lucas stopped showing up. Weeks later, on a gray, wet morning, he ducked into a small coffee shop on a quiet street, cap pulled, low collar turned up. He ordered a black coffee, paid cash, and sank into the farthest corner. That's when she walked in. She wasn't loud, but she had presence. Dark curls pulled back in a loose bun, navy coat damp at the edges, green scrubs peeking out underneath. She shook off her umbrella and stepped to the counter like she'd done it 100 times. When she turned with her coffee, she didn't scan the room, she just sat at the table next to his. Lucas was half watching his phone when his cup slipped, spilling coffee down his sleeve. "Damn," he muttered. Before he could move, she was already there, napkins in hand. "Hold still," she said, blotting at the stain with quick practice motions. "It's fine," he said more defensively than he meant. "It's not fine." "Coffee stains," she replied without looking up. When she finally did, her gaze landed right on his face. No flicker, no pity. "You've had skin grafts," she said matter-of-factly. He froze. "You're observant." "I'm a reconstructive surgeon," she said, balling up the napkins. "Off duty." She held out her hand. "Nia Parker." He hesitated, then shook it. "Lucas." They talked for a few minutes about coffee, not the accident. She left with a casual, "Try not to spill on yourself again, Lucas." And just like that, she was gone. But he realized minutes later he was still smiling. They started running into each other, sometimes at the coffee shop, sometimes at the park near the hospital. She asked questions, but never the wrong ones. She called scars stubborn instead of ugly. She didn't pretend they weren't there, and she didn't treat him like he was broken. One evening, Nia invited him to a hospital charity gala. Crowds weren't his thing anymore, but something in her confidence pushed past his walls. The night of the event, Lucas stepped into the room in his tux, feeling like an actor in a role he used to play effortlessly. People looked, but Nia set the tone, introducing him to surgeons, nurses, donors. Nobody mentioned his scars. For the first time in months, he felt like more than a headline. 2 weeks later, Sabrina texted, "We should talk." They met at a rooftop restaurant. She looked exactly the same, polished perfect. "I made a mistake," she said, voice soft. "That night, I panicked. I should have stayed." Lucas swirled the whiskey in his glass. "You told me I wasn't good for you anymore." "I was scared," she said quickly. "But we had something real. We can try again." He studied her. "You didn't want me when things were hard. Now you see me at an event with someone else, and suddenly you remember you care." Her jaw tightened. "You think that doctor understands your world?" "She doesn't care about my world," he said. "She cares about me, the man I am now." When he left, the air outside felt lighter. Not because Sabrina was gone again, but because this time he had closed the door. From then on, he and Nia grew closer. She told him his scars made him look strong, and she meant it. They walked along the river one cool evening, her hair catching the streetlight, and without thinking, he brushed a strand from her face. She looked at him like she saw every part of him, and none of it scared her. Months later, at the same coffee shop where they'd met, Lucas slid a small velvet box across the table. "You didn't try to rebuild the man I was," he said quietly. "You saw the one I am now, and you stayed." She opened it, a simple platinum band with a single diamond. "Yes," she said before he could even ask. Their wedding was nothing like the high society spectacles he used to attend. A converted countryside inn, rows of white chairs, pale roses on a wooden arch. Only the people who mattered. When it was his turn to speak, Lucas looked into her eyes. "You saw me when I couldn't even look at myself. You loved the man standing here now. Because of you, I don't just live, I live without hiding." Her voice was steady. "Your scars tell me who you are, and I'm proud of every part of that story." They kissed, and the world didn't vanish, but it felt right. As the sun dipped below the hills that night, Lucas leaned toward her and said, "You realize you're stuck with me now? I'm counting on it." She smiled. And for the first time since that night on the bridge, he didn't feel the weight of what he'd lost, only the certainty of what he'd found. So tell me, if someone walked out on you in your darkest moment, then tried to walk back in when the light returned, would you open the door or keep it locked for good?